So we'll do the usual thing about, I just want a few introductions. So welcome to people who are here, including members of the public. Nice to see you. We're saying it's webcast, the recording's available later. Apparently it's possible that Sheffield Live TV may record and rebroadcast the meeting. I'm not sure if that's happening, but there we are. As usual, can you please make sure your phones are turned off? There's no fire test planned. If the fire alarm goes off, get out of the building by following people. And then we'll go around and just introduce members of the committee and then officers. And if people who are substituting for someone else can say who they're substituting for, that would be really helpful. So to start off, my name is Douglas Johnson. I'm a councillor for City Ward and I chair this committee. So I'll go round in this order, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Penny Baker, Vice Chair and Member for Stannington Ward.
Thank you.
Barbara Masters, Councillor for Ecclesall Ward.
Alan Woodcock, Councillor for East Ecclesfield Ward.
Thank you. Okay.
Paul Turpin, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor Sinead Myers-Richards, Councillor for Manor Castle, and I'm substituting for Councillor Alison Norris.
Thank you.
Councillor Nabila Maulana, I'm the Councillor for Park and Arbourthorne, and I'm the Labour spokesperson.
Great, thanks very much. I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves before we go through apologies. So, starting over here.
I'm Robert Parkin. I'm Council Officer and Legal Advisor to the committee this morning.
This time we'll go around this way. Great.
I'm Rachel Marshall, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
Thanks. Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Jay Bell, Democratic Services, just looking after the webcasting today.
Thanks. And on the other side of the room, should we go over, just in this order? Thanks.
Okay, I'm Dean Butterworth. I'm Head of Housing Investment and Maintenance.
Thank you.
Morning everyone, Tom Smith, Director of Operational Services.
Janet Sharp, Director of Housing.
Thanks. Okay, so for the webcast, Janet Sharp, Director of Housing. Is that mic working, or can we either so we can fix it or whatever? So just a reminder to anyone, it's really important to speak into the mics when we're doing this because of the webcast. It's quite hard to hear otherwise. And with
Chair, are we expecting Jane Wilby, or is that?
We are, and I was going to say...
Sit over there and delight us from there.
So I was going to ask other officers, so that Jane, to introduce themselves when they come up for the particular item at this point, and anyone else who comes in. And then also, for the members of the public, it's nice to see you here. When you come up, we can have an introduction of who you are, if you like. So, thanks very much. Just before we go on to apologies, I just wanted to say that on this week, on Tuesday, we had the first meeting of the Tenant Voices Matter panel. So this is a bit experimental to have a panel of tenants who have largely self-selected, but are able to have a look at the agenda papers and discuss them directly with members. So thanks to the members here who came to that and were able to respond and discuss with the tenants there. I think it's fair to say that I don't think there are any direct observations on the agenda, but there's some useful comments about housing neighbourhoods and housing repairs. So if we move on, we'll go through the apologies. So, Rachel, just want to announce the apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Paul Wood, Councillor Mazza Iqbal and Councillor Alison Norris, and as mentioned earlier, substituting for Councillor Alison Norris is Councillor Sinead Myers-Richards. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks, and thanks for filling in at short notice, Sinead. It's appreciated. Okay, so item 2 is exclusion of press and public. I don't think that arises today. Item 3 is the declarations of interest. So quick rip round to members here, asking if there's any declarations of interest. I'm not expecting any. No, none of those. Thanks, Rachel. Item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting, which you'll find at page 11. Assume we've checked those. Can I check if people are happy to accept those as a correct record? I'm seeing nods there. No dissent. Right. Should we treat that as Agreed unanimously, thank you. Item 5 is the public questions, so now we get on to the more interesting bit. So this morning we've got one petition and 2 public questions done. So we usually go through petitions first, so I think I will do that. The petitioner isn't here herself. I think there's 6 signatures on the petition. Can I just take advice on where we are with that petition? I'm hoping it's in hand, largely. Rachel, are you able to advise us on that?
Thank you, Chair. There is a response to the petition. Would you like to read it out? Do you want me to read it out?
Can you tell us what the petition is?
I will, yes, okay. So I've got a note of the petition and a possible answer here. It's a pity the petitioner isn't here, but it's equally understandable. The petition is from someone called Akra Shaibi, and there are 6 signatures as I understand it. There could well be more. The undersigned petition the council to fix the flats from the outside and inside so the rats and mice don't go in. And it's referring to some blocks of flats on Verdon Street in Pittsmore. Asking to block the holes and gaps between our flat and the neighbours, sort out all the flats instead of just one because the pests come back, fix the mould and damp problems that we all have. We all pay rent and we need this problem sorted. And I think it's a petition that will resonate with many people across the city and reflects the work that's going on. So I won't go through all the extra text there, but I will just give the response about what's happened there. So in response, the North East Housing Team, Environmental Services have been commissioned by Housing to carry out a full external technical survey of each block. Each block has 20 flats in it. And feedback, any actions and recommendations to prevent any further infestations in the future. Housing are working with the repairs service to ensure that the entry points are sealed. Before any baiting of rats and mice happens, all tenants and residents will receive some correspondence, and that's to support the treatment work. The repairs service are prioritising reports of damp and mould. So apparently the service has undertaken work on 38 properties so far on Verdon Street, and the aim is to attend reports of damp and mould within 5 working days, and a longer-term solution for blocks on Verdon Street is being explored, and work's being commissioned to look at this. The officer visited the block that the petition relates to specifically, and the 4 neighbouring blocks, and the officers have visited all the properties there. So there's 5 blocks, 20 flats per block, so it's quite a sizable number of tenants there. Spoken with the majority of tenants and residents, left contact cards for those who aren't at home. And the housing team have recorded full details where tenants and residents have mice within their flat and where there are reports of damp and mould. Being taken very seriously, as you can see from that, and the housing team met on site with officers from the environmental team to work out the best treatment for the infestations. And for those interested, the orders for baiting the blocks have come at a cost of £1,866 per block. So it's a fairly comprehensive sort of approach there that I'm being told we have. So that's the response to the petition. Shona, did you want to comment on that? Yeah, because we don't normally have a debate on petitions, but if there's observations, then I think it's useful to have them.
We don't, Chair, but it brings up a lot of questions. You know, and members are automatically thinking, what the heck? We've got 100 flats with damp, mould and rats and all in one area. Why? How? Why have we got to this state? You know, it's not acceptable. There's obviously, I think I know which flats they are. They're the ones that look a bit like masonettes. They're quite boxy, so they're of a design that would help, you know, generate damp and mould and flats. But we would have expected our area housing team to know there was a problem there, to highlight it, and not let it get to this sort of stage where we're getting this sort of information at a housing team. And I would like to know, Chair, as quickly as possible. I hear what people are doing about it, and I appreciate that. How the heck we've got into this situation? I'll shut up because I could go on forever.
Right, no, thanks. Now you've raised that, I mean, I think we all know it's a fairly widespread and entrenched problem amongst a lot of the big estates, and it's quite a difficult thing to eradicate. So that's why there's a lot of intense work going on. Would it be useful, members, to have a particular briefing on the work that is being done on that, the estates that are most affected? And
I don't want a briefing. I want it solved, and I want to know what's happening. I'm quite horrified. I know we've got problems. We've got problems with design things in some of the flats that we're all struggling to deal with. The same in some of the council properties in my area and in other areas. We know that properties that were designed in the past aren't suitable for now. And we're working really hard to put it right. And a lot of officer support on that. But this is something out of the blue, as far as I'm concerned. And Sinead wanted to ask a question.
I think Nabila did too. I mean, I think the point is that we all know it's not out of the blue. These issues with rats and mice have been entrenched for some considerable time. Just from the other side, did Nabila or Sinead, would you like to?
I was just going to come in and say, I think it's quite, I'll use the word sad, but I think I mean shocking, that this has to come to committee with a petition for us to be undertaking work on it, and it smacks to me of people thinking I'm not going to get something done unless I go right to the top, and that shouldn't happen. It should be part of our everyday work. And I wanted to know how long this has been going on. You sort of said, Douglas, that you thought it's been a perennial problem, but it does appear that people have, that it has got worse and worse. Are we actually talking to Yorkshire Water as well about how rats are able to get in, whether there are water courses and things that they're also getting in through? And then I just want to ask what the time scale is for sorting this for Verdon Street. We said we've asked Environmental Health to inspect. Is that on a list that will happen in May, or is it in a list that has already happened? And don't we have a programme of inspections and repairs such that it shouldn't get to this stage?
Right, okay. We could end up with a long-run debate here. I'll bring in Tom Smith, who can probably give the best answers in relation to some of the programme of repairs work. But I mean, frankly, it shouldn't come as a surprise to committee members to know that, rats and mice are a problem amongst, many housing estates across the city, not just the council, of course. It's not a secret that rats have been around for several centuries. But I think there's probably an element about, the increasing warm and wet temperatures. We have the rising average temperatures, and it may be one of the facets of climate change that we're going to see more epidemics of rats in future, and it's something to think about. I'll ask Tom, as Director of Direct Services, or whatever you are now, to come in and just say what the programme is.
Thanks, Douglas. And despite my kind of professional background pre-Sheffield City Council, I won't talk about rats and causes and rises and where we are with rats nationally, but you're kind of right in terms of climate. It is not helpful in terms of that. I'll maybe ask Janet to talk a bit about the programme of things that have been done around pest control. I just really quickly want to talk about the damp and mould stuff at Verdon Street, and to be honest, about this particular archetype of property, which we do have a problem with across the city from a damp and mould perspective. First thing I want to say is that just to be really clear, the work that's taken place that was outlined in the response took place before the petition, so it hasn't, Councillor, taken a petition for us to act on the concerns that have been raised at Verdon Street. We've been working on Verdon Street for quite a significant amount of time and have undertaken quite a lot of work around damp and mould. I think, so I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but something like 40 or 50 of the properties on Verdon Street have had work in the last year associated with damp and mould in that area. So we have undertaken work to those properties prior to a petition arriving here in committee. So I would just want to stress that. They are challenging, these archetypes. There are repairs problems, and I wouldn't want to hide that in terms of, you know, some of the issues we're finding, but actually some of the issues are exacerbated by the cost of living crisis, and the fact that in these properties especially, if tenants cannot afford to heat their homes properly, cannot afford to ventilate their homes properly, then that will exacerbate problems with damp and mould, especially in a cost of living crisis. And in these types of properties where we probably have our our poorest people, to be perfectly frank, we do see these issues more prevalent. And the work that we're doing through the damp and mould strategy is designed to address not just the repairs issues, but actually to also address those issues around cost of living, to support tenants to be able to put the heating on things, because that is often the solution to the problems that we're finding in terms of damp and mould. I don't know, Jana, whether you wanted to just touch on the pest control stuff or not.
Jan, it would be useful to have some brief comments on there. I don't want to drag this out longer, but I think it probably is relevant, it's of interest, and it does relate to the reports we've got later on.
Sorry, yes, certainly. And one of the things that is taking place is I'm chairing quite a programme group that's bringing, in terms of colleagues from waste, from housing, from repairs, in terms of how we find a preventing strategy to dealing. We are seeing increases of infestations, and particularly in some archetypes. And one of the things that needs is a clear plan, and particularly, you know, how we support residents, and also how we make sure that in terms of how we are dealing with waste around some of our blocks, but also the cleaning of our blocks, and also some of the issues around we quickly respond to infestations and issues, but rather than it being in individual services, that we have a collective approach. And also that work is at an advanced stage. We are looking at an approach and then how that can be rolled out across the city. And that was a key priority when we looked at the HRA business plan for this year that's elsewhere on the agenda. One of the things it may well be helpful is in the new year is to bring the action plan and the approach that we may take for the city, but also similar to what Tom said in terms of some of the positives from the work that's taken place on the damp and mould work, is very much looking at the approaches that we take, how we bring teams together and work together collectively to be able to resolve particular issues. And as Thomas said, some of these issues, we need to do more to support our tenants, and particularly our tenants facing significant hardship. But also we have to look at the way we're allocating homes as well, to make sure that's suitable as well. And there's a number of reports that are coming to this committee later in the new year in 2024. And what the aim is to address all of those issues, that also to try and prevent the instance of damp and mould, but also to make sure our homes are warm, and also make sure we can manage going forward pest control in a more holistic way. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Right, didn't want to string this out anymore, but you really did indicate.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to wait until the HRA business plan to bring this up, but because when you referenced it, Janet, so we've mentioned, I think it's on page 83, 3.4, it talks about the Race Equality Commission. There's a paragraph in there, and it talks about the HRA's impact on BAME residents. Now, we know that across the country and in Sheffield, our BAME residents tend to live in the poorest housing in the city. We've just heard about Verdon Street's flats. You know, we talk about 100 flats per block. There's multiple blocks. But, you know, the HRA business plan doesn't talk about what this impact is. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is there any action plan attached to it? Is there any action around staff, like being staff in the housing team? And I suppose I just find it really lacking, Chair, in that respect. And given the recent conversations that have taken place in SNR, I'd like to see more, but I'd also like us to see us taking a similar approach to what we did in Edward Street flats, where we took stock of the whole property and didn't sort of deal with individual issues as they came along. And, you know, really heartened to hear about an action plan, Janice. I suppose I'd like significant detail in that action plan when it does come to committee, and, you know, really showing how we've engaged with tenants, and how we continue to engage with tenants in a meaningful manner. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think there's two important points there, and a really important one is about just reflecting, and I think we should all accept this, that BME tenants do disproportionately live in poor quality housing across the country, and we reflect also in Sheffield, and I think you'll know, don't you, that in Verdon Street there's quite a high population of non-white tenants there, and that have been affected by what have proved to be sort of chronic issues of damp and mould, which is, I think, why it's important that we continue to have that particular focus on damp and mould in all our properties, because, as you say, it is actually an equalling up issue to tackle, these worst cases of disrepair. And then the second thing you think has been addressed, it's the issue about doing sort of block-wide and estate-wide approach to repairs, isn't it? And I think we've heard now that that is the approach that's being taken here. We've got this comprehensive assessment of going out to talk to, I think, all the tenants in those particular blocks, not just the ones who had got the ability to report repairs, which is an important point, I think, isn't it? Are you happy with that? Shall we move on from there? That's been really useful scene setting, I think, for the future items. I think formally we need to do something with this petition. I think because all the work's in hand, I propose that we formally don't take the petition any further, and we'll presumably respond to the petitioner with the prepared answer there. Unless we have further objections or further proposals. Which one of you wants to go first? John?
I'll go first this time, Penny. Just to say that I think it would be very useful to receive updates. If we have petitions, they often just disappear into the ether. So having an update of what has happened subsequently so that we're sure that it has been responded to well would be very useful to a future committee.
Right. So I think the proposal from the Director of Housing was to bring updates in the new year about our approach to damp and mould. So the question of committees, do we want to have the citywide approach to damp and mould and keep on top of that? Or do we want to have a specific conversation or item just about these flats?
Both.
Right, okay. I'm just thinking about how you want to schedule the time used for committees.
Well, you want to monitor what happens to your, you ought to have a monitoring report every committee giving small updates on whether questions that have come in or petitions that have come in, so that the committee is aware that stuff has come.
Right.
And what is being done until the committee decides it has been completed. As a temporary member today.
Okay, all right. Now, I hope you're not sort of just storing up extra work for a committee that you're not going to be on next time.
Absolutely.
Penny.
We do need to keep up with petitions. It's important that we know what the response has been and that tenants or members of the public generally are happy with the long-term response. It's, it's part of our responsibilities, I would have thought. But I think we need very much to keep abreast with what's happening with damp and mould. It's a big thing, as we all know, right through the city. A lot of it's caused by some of the building systems we've used in the past, and there are lessons we need to learn from in the future. It's vibrating.
Not sure what's going on there, Penny.
So going forward, I think we need to remain the updates with damp and mould around the city, and a point in that, an update on Burton Street. And I think if any other system or scheme comes through that we've become aware of, we would probably want an update on that as part of it. It doesn't need to be a load. It needs to be, we're 3/4 of the way through, we found this problem, or we've now completed it and we've solved these problems and we're learning from them in the future. It's as simple as that, but we need to know what's going on. It's a major issue across the city. We know that. We know the work's being done. We know we've got the unit to deal with it, but we need to know it's happening day in, day out, and it's not being put on one side, and be able to report back to our tenants when we need to. And that took longer than I expected. I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes, it did. Right, so I think there's consensus that we want to keep damp and mould on the agenda, and that seems to be proposed for the new year. So that's one element of this, and that's something we can make sure we add to the work plan. And then the second thing is, I think you're saying that we want to keep this specific petition as another item for the future agenda. And if you want to do that,
there
then
ought to be
well,
just an update, a standing item on each agenda that just says update on petitions and questions, and then you can either put on it nothing's happened or this has all happened and we think it's completed. And it's not a difficult thing to do.
It's not generally the way that committees work, and it might be something to take through governance, but I'm just looking at this specific petition. I mean, do people want to bring it back? Because the question is whether we should be booking as an item on the agenda for January, and if so, inviting the petitioner to come, given that we'll be talking about a specific block and the work's going to be done there, or is it something that we want to deal with as a general damp and mould update, addressing all the issues? I'll bring in Paul.
Thanks. So this is something that we've been discussing in Governance Committee, Sean Ed and I and other members, about how when a member of the public interacts with the council through public questions or petitions, how they are continued, how that member of the public feels like some resolution has been reached. And one of the things that continues to come up is following the thread of that issue as it progresses through the council, which at the moment that doesn't happen at all. So it's likely that in the future something like this will be a standing order on the papers, although that hasn't been decided yet. So what finer place and time than to try that out. But we could pilot it through the committee system in the Housing Committee, and all we need is literally a small section, a 1 minute update on has it been resolved yet, when will it be resolved?
Right, well, I mean, either it's a report on the agenda or it's not, but yeah, we can do that, can't we? Do people want to keep discussing this, or shall we get this on the work plan? Okay. Right, well, let's just go back. If people do want to carry on discussing this, then we'll go with this side. Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't so much a comment. It's just that listening to the tenant's voice the other day, it was quite clear that sort of their experiences were very, very different. And we still don't know from that meeting whether it affects the whole city or just an estate, or whether it's a particular kind of building type, or whether it's just individual cases. And I'm quite shocked that we don't know, and I just assumed it would be part of our way of working forward, because it affects so many of our citizens for no other reason than that. And the misery it creates is horrendous. Sorry, it's going to be a rant really, but yes, I completely agree. It'd be nice to have an update, to know that things are progressing as we think they are. Confirmation of that, thank you.
Right, I think everyone's spending a lot of time saying the same thing as each other, but...
I'd like to second Paul's proposal, Chair, to use the Housing Committee to pilot this way of bringing updates. That was all.
Right, okay, yeah. Does anyone else want to make the same point? Penny, do you want to make the same point?
I agree.
Excellent, right, okay, so I think everyone agrees that we should have this. All right, so in terms of disposing of this petition, I think we're in agreement that we want to bring this to the next meeting in January for an update on this specific petition, and in addition we'll have the anticipated updates on damp and mould across the city. Okay, so if we're doing that, then I think out of courtesy to the petitioner, we need to invite her specifically to that meeting if she wants to come, and so perhaps I can ask if we can make sure that happens. So, okay, right, thanks. It's been a bit of work in that, but we've got somewhere with that. Right, so we've got now 2 questions, and people are here for the questions. So shall we invite you to come up to one of the mics there? And can we make some space for, Dean, possibly you can make space for whichever one of you wants to come and speak to the question there. So when you're ready, if you press one of the buttons on the mic, you'll get the red light and then you'll be live. If you want to just introduce your, yeah, thanks for that. If you want to just say your name for the record and then say what your question is, and up to you how you take it.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Alexandra Odelga, and I am here as a representative of a Facebook support group for XL Bully owners. So my question relates to the incoming ban that comes into force at the end of this year. And I am looking for assurances that tenants who presently already own an XL Bully or a type of dog that could be deemed an XL Bully, that they will be allowed to keep those dogs in their properties. That's as simple as that. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very clear question there, and one that's really relevant, isn't it, and very topical now. So I think, like this question, there's been a bit of work amongst staff in the housing service about how we as a council and landlord deal with this issue, and of course with safeguarding the interests of all tenants and indeed their dogs. So I think the context is, as you know, the XL Bully breed has been added to the list of dangerous dogs in legislation, and obviously as a council we can't ignore that. It is really important, I think we all agree, that there's respect for the owners and for people who don't own the dogs as well. So the response that we've got, and this is after I've done quite a bit of thinking about this, starting point is that it's a condition of everyone's tenancy conditions relating to pets and animals of all sorts, and it's nothing to do with the particular breed of dogs. So the tenancy conditions say that unless you live in shelter housing, you may keep domestic pets in your home subject to conditions 19 to 21. So 19 says that you must not keep any animal which could cause a danger or a nuisance or which is not suitable for your property. And that's obviously going to be relevant here because by law now these dogs are classed as dangerous. Condition 20 is you must properly look after any animal and not allow it to do anything which could cause a danger, nuisance or annoyance to other people or to cause damage. So that's about respect for other people who live in the estates too. And then condition 21 is that if so Sheffield City Council formally tells you to remove an animal, you must do so. So further note, of course, is that from the 1st of February next year, it will be a criminal offence to own an XL Bully dog in England and indeed Wales, for those who are interested, John, unless the owner has a certificate of exemption, which people will be applying for a tenant to continue to keep an XL Bully dog in the home after the 1st of February. They must be able to produce to the certificate of exemption on request to the council. And in addition, you must, as long as you've got the dog there, you must have third-party public liability insurance and be able to produce evidence of this on request to the council. So I think whilst all these depend on the specific circumstances there, that's the framework for making decisions in. So in short, there's not going to be a complete blanket ban on those dogs that are in tenancies, but there are going to be very tight controls around those. And of course that is a role for the council landlord. It's also a role for the police in terms of enforcing the criminal law. But of course it's also, there's a role there for responsible owners and tenants of all our properties. Bottom line is to make sure that everyone is safe. So I hope that answers the question. I think we can get a copy of this in writing to you in the slightly fuller form there. So we'll
Yes,
send
please.
that over
That
to
would
you.
be really appreciated. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for bringing that. Okay. Now, we don't normally have debates on public questions, but
I'm not debating.
That's
I
okay.
just wanted to know how we're going, what is the process for telling everybody who's a council tenant what our do's and don'ts are going to be now? Is it going out in a letter to every tenant?
might just ask Jan to come in on that. I mean, there's a bit of work on sorting out what the process is going to be. Do we have an answer to that point? It's a good question.
Yes, well, there's one or two areas of the tenancy conditions that need a little bit further clarity of what those terms mean in the tenancy conditions. In the forward plan for this committee, we are bringing back quite a comprehensive report. And I think, you know, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a number of areas at committee where, you know, the alignment with the tenancy conditions and the policies and the strategies coming forward don't naturally align, but also to make sure that our tenants are clear of their responsibilities, we're clear as landlord of our responsibilities, and to make sure we all understand what's included in those key documents. So we are planning to bring that back early in the new year for the committee. Within the tenancy conditions, there is a clear section on pets. Pets in properties has been raised this morning, and one of the things that we are doing now, while we've seen obviously the direction that's obviously been provided regarding this particular breed, but maybe other breeds as well, is we are cross-checking that with our tenancy conditions. We're making sure it's clear, but also making sure that tenants, you know, are part of, you know, households and homes and family life. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure everyone is clear on the responsibilities and also what the law is saying. And if there are any changes to that. My intention is that I do think that this warrants a letter to tenants or in our tenant bulletin to advise, you know, what it is, what our understanding of this is, but also some reassurance that the absolutely vast majority, you know, of pets, you know, are well managed. And for those, and for the minority that are not, then that's where obviously tenancy management action will take place, and we will work with those owners to deal with the consequences of that. So I do suggest that maybe we bring forward obviously that report to this committee in the new year. I think it's down to already on the forward plan, but in the meantime I think it may well help to actually issue a communication to residents to make sure everybody is clear what our intentions are and how we intend to support residents with pets in their homes.
Thank you. I think that'll be a helpful way forward. Thanks very much for your question. That's been great. Should we go to the final question there? Thanks. And then likewise, there's the button to press the mic when it goes ready or live, and if you want to ask your question, so you've got 5 questions, you're welcome to ask them all together, and then I've got some prepared responses.
Right. My name's Maggie Young, I'm from the Gleadless Valley Labour Party. I'm asking these questions because we regularly visit people up on Gleadless Valley, and we feel that there's a lack of clarity about what's actually going to be happening or not happening. So 5 questions. The first one is about what's the actual timetable for the start and completion of building work on the Gleadless Valley estate, because obviously the master plan's been in the ether for more than 5 years. What's the housing offer for those people who may actually have to be moved out of their properties? What's the delivery plan for bringing the housing up to Energy Performance Certificate C? What are the proposals for including renewable energy as part of the developments? And is there a timetable for delivery of training and job opportunities, for example, in retrofitting, etc., for people who actually live on the estate? So it's just generally trying to find some clear information so that we can be clear when visiting people in those flats and about what's actually happening for the future.
Great, thanks. The 5 good questions, because they're already pertinent to the things that we all discussed, and at least 3 of us here sit on the Gleaders Valley Governance Board in turn. So, of your 5 questions, so I've got some notes here about where we are. In terms of the timetable of start and completion building work, obviously, as you know, inflation in the construction industry has escalated, and so the starting point is the £98 million set aside for the Gleaders Valley scheme doesn't go as far as when the plan was first agreed, and that means that the team's been doing a lot of rethinking about the delivery of that. So the regeneration team is working with colleagues in other council departments, such as the Capital Delivery Service, it's the focus on delivery and planning and housing growth, to re-understand the construction costs for the various elements of the scheme, lead times for beginning major works there. And so the simple answer is, at present, we're still determining what a phased delivery plan will look like under the new cost regime and the cost implications. And therefore, we can't give dates for the start of work, never mind the finish of any construction work. The next things that we should see there, though, are some demolition work of the former Chefcare sites, Castor Lane and Paddock Hill. And then the intention is those sites will then be cleared to deliver new housing, and that should be underway in 2024. And then the second priority is the work for the Mugger, the multi-use games area on the Spotswood side. So again, there should be something happening on that site over 2024, and that visible progress will be positive, I think. So your second question is about the people who may have to be moved, as you put it. I think it's fair to say that all members agreed that it's essential to deliver new housing before anyone's required to move from their home. And that's learning from previous demolition clearance schemes in the past that the council's done. Your third one is about the issue about bringing housing up to EPC level C, which is the definite aim there. So the answer we got is that as we progress each project, the surveys will be carried out to understand the level of investment needed to ensure compliance with Part L of the building regs, which is the bit on environmental performance. So in short, it's an ongoing piece of work and recognises that not all the properties are at the same starting point there. On 4 for renewable energy, glad you're asking about that, because we might have mentioned renewable energy in the past. Definitely good green thing there. So the position with that is that the council's commissioned its external consultant, that's RLB, to deliver a route map for net zero. But that's for the council's entire housing stock. But that's important to provide a basis for asset planning and capital investment. A lot's yet to be determined in that, but the plans for Gleaders Valley should include the installation of PV solar panels, but that's going to need to look at where the funding comes from, in as much as it's not already budgeted for. There's also the issue about, so we still don't have a policy on how the energy generated from renewable energy is used. So in other words, the split of how it goes to tenants or to the council as landlord, and we do need to do that piece of work. And your final question was about delivery of training and job opportunities, which is another really important thing. The regeneration team are looking at that. They're working in partnership with Opportunity Sheffield, which is the council bit, the DWP, and then local organisations in Gleaders Valley to support an employment and skills package for people in Gleaders Valley. The funding's been confirmed, although in a bit I don't actually know where that's from. It's for anyone 16 and over. Contracts are due to commence early in the new year, so that's good. And as soon as the delivery partners have been confirmed, there'll be information on this. So the Regen team plan to put on their Facebook page, and I'd also ask that it goes back and is done through the other channels, including on the main council's website on the page there. Also worth noting that council actually employs about 125 apprentices running throughout housing and repairs, and it's a really important way of training up new people to do good quality jobs. And in particular, when you talk about renewables, it's promoting the whole thing about green jobs, which again, some must be mentioning for a few years, so I hope that's very welcome. So that's the summary of it. Hope you find that useful, even though it's not as specific as giving precise dates and prices there. Paul, yeah, as being one of the ward members, do you want to come in? Just tell me if I've got any of that wrong.
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. And I do want to respond to some of the questions as your ward councillor, and also, apart from Janet, the longest standing person to be involved with the GV master plan since 2019, and actually before I was elected as a citizen from 2018.
Elected as a citizen?
I mean, before I was elected,
I remember voting for you to be a citizen.
comma, as elected, before elected as a citizen. Yeah, in the steering group for the GV master plan, we've been pushing for things to be done, knowing that there are obstacles to development at the moment due to things already explained. And the mug has been one of them. Since my involvement, when I was first involved, the master plan was very much just about housing, and so many of the things that you've mentioned are included because of Green's presence on that board, which I'm sure you'll be delighted that our ward elected Greens. Social issues, youth provision, they're in there because Greens have been involved in the master plan since the beginning. The mugger that that Douglas mentioned, we're putting a significant amount of funding towards that from our ward SIL pot to make sure that there's extra things and extra provision available even in the darker evenings during the winter to keep young people engaged in sports and positive activities. The local housing policy is there because Greens raised that at the time, and it includes people who are private renters as well as tenants. Former Labour councillors didn't want private renters to be included in that local lettings policy, but Councillor Alexi Diamond and I made sure that everybody who lived there has a chance to remain there if they want to, because we recognise that it's about communities and families and not just who you have your housing contract with. We've also been constantly pushing for higher quality building standards than the current regulations offer. Unfortunately, while we were sitting in steering group meetings pushing this, there was also separate private meetings going on with the cabinet member of that time, who was a Labour cabinet member, who was pushing back on that and had a preference to go for more rather than higher quality when it came to housing in Gleadless. But as we no longer have a cabinet system and no overall control, we feel that we can get a housing standard that is beyond current regulations. Again, renewable energy, been pushing. I'll just go through the questions, Douglas, I'm sorry. With renewable energy, again, we've been pushing. At the beginning, it was suggested to just install hundreds of new gas boilers. Started raising the possibility of geothermal heating that could heat entire blocks and rows of houses, and having a policy, as mentioned, whereby people's rent could be inclusive of the bills, which means that the council could then benefit from installing the renewable energy systems, as well as the tenants having lower bills. And finally,
yeah, I just want to wrap it up, partly to move on, and also just reminded that, I've completely forgotten this, that we're actually in a period of PERP because of a by-election coming up, completely overlooked because it's...
completely on the other side of the city as well, though, Douglas.
Exactly, it is. So I do want to move on, though, if we can, fairly shortly.
Okay, well, and finally, this is a cross-party working group. Penny Baker's just left the room, but she's been contributing brilliantly, along with the Green councillors from the ward and Douglas's chair. Unfortunately, no Labour member has attended any meetings in the last year for this steering group.
I think at this case...
So I'm sure
come
you're
on,
delighted.
no, come on, Douglas.
Let me just...
we are in a period of PERP, and explain to your member what that means, because it includes the entire city.
I'm just going to call on the solicitor to the committee to say what the position is.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, no, we do need to operate with some sensitivity on this. So I think it might be an appropriate time to move forward, but perhaps part of the written response could incorporate what is suggested there. We can look at that. Obviously, we didn't have the opportunity to look at what's been read out, but yeah, so perhaps if we move on without suggesting that any improprieties taking place, let's move on if we can, Chair.
I think that's helpful. It is time to move. It is time to move on on that. The written response will come from me as chair and will be like as read out here. It's tend to be neutral. It is fair to say that the GV member board is cross-party. But yeah, back to your questions. Thanks for the questions, Maggie. I mean, they are relevant ones there. We'll get the written response to you so that there's a record of that, if that's okay. And
I just think it's important to say that I do feel, I know we've got the GV regeneration team, we've got Facebook, but it is actually quite difficult. I think we've found it quite difficult to get concrete information that we can impart to others, and it has all been going on for a long, long time. So I know that we would appreciate updates, because you also get the impression that different people are having different meetings in different places, and it's difficult to get all the information together.
I think, Paul, I think it's a fair point. It's something that we've all said, and so I just want to draw a line under this and move on. Maggie, we'll send a written response, and yeah, thanks very much for bringing your question. Secondly, just actually apologies to the committee. I hadn't clocked at all that we are in a period of PERP, and probably should have said that before we started the meeting, and probably we should have also thought about bringing petitions that are explicitly from political parties. But we'll move on. I think the advice is that no impropriety has happened. So we'll move on now. We'll move on to item 6. So item 6 is members' questions. That's fairly easy because there are no members' questions. So item 7 is the work plan. And I wonder if we can have a look at the work plan on page 17, and I'll ask Rachel, who's very cold, to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies that I do have my coat on, but as Chair said, I am rather cold. So on page 17, we've got the committee work programme. At the top of page 18, there are a set of recommendations that we'll be asking the committee to approve today. At the bottom of page 18, under section 2, which is references from council or other committees, you will see in there that there was an issue regulating the supported accommodation sector that was referred from full council on the 1st of November. And you can see that there is action proposed, so there will be a detailed report to be presented to this committee in the new year to follow that up. So that was just to draw the committee's attention to that. In Appendix 1, which is on page 20, you will be able to see any items that are new or have been moved around between different meetings on the agenda. And then on page 21, which is part 3, you've got the agenda items for forthcoming meetings. So that is back over to the committee now to discuss if there's anything that you feel you want to raise or put onto the work programme, then we can discuss that now, and I will pass back to Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Right. Nabila, so Councillor Milano, would you want to comment first?
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of points I wanted to raise about the work programme. I don't know if you want me to go through it individually or ask it all at once.
Go through them in whatever order you think is right.
Right, thank you. So the report on selective licensing is due to come in March of 2024.
Yeah.
And by that point, the scheme will have ended. There'll have been a gap of 6 months. The Labour's Journal Manifesto of beg your pardon.
Yes, we'll get the solicitor onto you if you start
I
plugging. Yes.
do apologise. There was agreement that selective licensing was an important topic, and that's why we ran the scheme. I'm a little bit worried about the gap we must have interim reports on the effectiveness of the scheme. Winter is the most difficult period for private renters, and I am worried that, leaving it so long will cause problems. So I'd like to propose bringing it to the January meeting if possible. Similarly with net zero, I'd like to bring the item before March. I want to see specific engagement plans on how we're going to do this. If it's not possible to bring it to the January meeting because of the agenda, I'd like to propose that we have extra meetings. I'm conscious that we have 2 more meetings scheduled between now and essentially the end of the municipal year. One of the meetings is on the 21st of March, which is the last day we can make decisions as a council, which doesn't leave much scope for, I suppose, actions from that meeting to be carried forward. So that is a bit of a concern. Again, on migrant housing, it says we've had no public engagement. We've raised it at previous committee meetings, about the provisions we have in the city, and I'd really like to see a proper plan of engagement with those partners and organisations. And the housing strategy, it says that we don't still have a date for it. And that was what I had, Chair. Right,
thanks very much. I just wonder if we can ask about the selective licensing. I mean, it's a bit surprising to see it's a new item on here because it definitely was on our work plan previously. So let's just look at that one first. I think your request is, can that be brought forward from March to January? Probably a practical thing. Can it actually be done? I don't know why it's been delayed or whatever. Janet?
So one of the things that we have brought earlier this financial year is a detailed report on all of the different enforcement activity regarding private rented housing. One of the things that we are doing is bringing an end of scheme report and what we do moving forward on selective licensing. A lot of detailed work is taking place by the team. The timetable from today for reports in January, given the date of the January Housing Policy Committee, is very, very tight. And so in terms of the work that I've commissioned for officers to carry out, given obviously some of the helpful feedback obviously from Councillor here today, is that I feel that we do need a little bit more time to bring forward that report so we respond to all of the issues that have been raised with me and officers regarding selective licensing, and also, the results and the outcomes from the London Road and Abbeydale scheme.
Right, thanks. I
am keen for it to come forward at January is a little bit tight.
Right. I mean, I think given that we've got 11th of January, so the papers have been published just shortly after New Year, I think that's probably the reality of where we are. I don't know if pass back to you. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question in that it's, not possible.
I share your disappointment, I know, but we always want to get more things done earlier.
Absolutely. I am still concerned about, I suppose, the scale of work we've undertaken on the work programme, and a lot of it doesn't have definitive dates against it, or, we're bringing reports quite late in the municipal year where I suppose members of this committee on this year won't have much opportunity to shape it or progress it. So, I'd like to, I suppose, propose having an extra meeting if we need to, Chair, to get through the items on the work programme sooner rather than later.
Right, so we've got proposal her next meeting, which will presumably be in February, if it's not January and March. I don't know how feasible that is or what arrangements we have to do to put that in place. Robert, your finger's hovering over the mic and you have a thought there. Let's have your thoughts on the practicality.
So you can call one, but it's probably, I would say, better to do it looking at the overall programme and outside of the instant that we are in this committee, because you need to take a balanced view. But I think we could probably note in a minute the pressure on the time of the committee, and that might be something that makes some sense. But that's for you, and it's not for this committee to resolve.
Right, so that perhaps means we need some thinking outside this meeting as to, and we'll perhaps do this through one of the briefings or the next pre-agenda meeting. In fact, next pre-agenda meeting, Nabila, could you raise that specifically as a reminder? Let me go over to Penny.
Chair, just on that, looking at the date it is today, and the fact that we have a Christmas holiday coming up, and the date of the next meeting on the 11th of January, and when the documents are published, it would be extremely difficult to bring another item to that. I don't like to say that, but it would really be difficult. The problem with the February meeting, as far as I can see, is that the work that has to be done then at the beginning of March, it's the council budget. So officer time is being taken up by the need to do that. It doesn't make that item less important, and it does make it something we'd want to discuss. But to have a formal meeting on it might be difficult. Is there some way we can discuss it and activate things without a formal meeting, Chair, is my question.
Let's take this outside the meeting and work out how we want to do things. And so we found that there is a limit on how much office capacity we've got to just have extra meetings and create extra reports, and we do put extra work on them. It's also a question about how much extra work members here are prepared to put in to make this work. But yeah, let's take this outside the meeting. I think we've heard the practical answer about getting extra things on the January agenda, given the timescales. Did that answer all your points there, Nabila? Well, we'll come back if need be. I'll take other people first. Paul, briefly, and then John.
Thanks. You are. I just want to say I can't see anything that's explicitly about damp and mould, so forgive me if it's in there and I've missed it, or if it's
right. Let's sort of, where's the damp and mould, or is that an addition to it? So let's see. On page 22, we've got the January meeting. So we've got the older persons independent living, the issue about protecting migrants from discriminatory housing conditions, which is a referral from full council. We've got the conditions of tenancy, which will include the dogs issue, tenant and leaseholder engagement strategy, housing repairs policy, which, no, sorry, that's approval revised policy. Okay. So
can I interrupt? Because I had my hand up.
Sorry, wait, just one minute,
because I thought it was part of the standing items. And that's, because surely we've just asked for updates on damp and mould to be featured regularly.
Damp and mould.
Yes, certainly. So we brought a report on damp and mould in September, and one of the things that we said in the September meeting is that we needed to hold a workshop to go through many issues on damp and mould that members have raised independently and collectively at this meeting, to look again at our policy, at our plans, and also our priorities, which is a key feature of the HRA business plan for 24-25. At that meeting, one of the things that we said is that given lots of work was taking place, lots of recommendations from government was coming forward thick and fast as well to local authorities, is that we would bring back in March a comprehensive report on damp and mould and refresh our plans, policies and action plan for March. So officers and myself and Tom and Dean, who are pulling all of that detailed work together, our plan was to bring that forward to the March committee meeting. Apologies if this doesn't appear on the forward plan. I think but that was a recommendation for the meeting when we brought that in September, and we're working towards that. That doesn't stop us on meetings having a quick update on damp and mould and any other related issues that we have, or some things that may well come from public questions. We're happy to do that, but we are working to have a comprehensive report being presented at this meeting in March, if that is still acceptable.
Right, so the logic of that means that we should formally add an update on damp and mould to the March work plan. So are we okay noting that? Okay, so we'll record that, Rachel. That adds an item there. So Shoned.
Thanks. The workshop on damp and mould, is that going to be as a result of that report, or something you're going to have before? Because you said that it was agreed in September. So when is the actual workshop going to take place? And then question 2 was page 26, the approval of a new housing strategy for the city and consideration of a new housing strategy, etc., which it says will require significant engagement with members through a task and finish group. So does that need to be set up now in order to contribute to a new housing strategy? Because there doesn't seem to be, it says that there's no date set yet, but if there's going to be creative use of online engagement, etc., then does that not need to start ahead of then approving a new housing strategy for the city?
Right, let's just take those one at a time. First one goes back to when's this member session going to take place? Rob's just referred me to the minutes from November where we did say we'd have a deep dive session, which I think we're expecting in January, but also that we would have that, the outcome of that referred to the committee meeting in January. Have we got some dates penciled in for those? Where are we with those?
We're presently working through, obviously, how we might, the scope of that workshop, as set out by our Executive Director, Ajman Ali, at the last meeting. So we're trying to get dates in the diary towards the end of January, so that we've got plenty of time then to turn around those reports for the March committee. That's the present timeline. I'm happy to pick up the question on the housing strategy, if that would be helpful.
Right, so it's just bottom this out again. So I think what that means is we have to acknowledge that we've not got the deep dive that was planned for January, and therefore we can't bring the report back to January, so therefore we're putting in on March, which is the bit we've just resolved. So yeah, we have to accept that we've not been able to do the bit that we agreed in only last month. Okay, let's go back to the housing strategy one. Janet, are you able to answer Shoned's second question?
Yes, certainly. There has been running over the last, I believe, like 12 months from the Housing Policy Committee task and finish meetings, where there's been huge amounts of work taking place cross-party to look at all of the key priorities with what you would expect to see in a housing strategy. This is a key strategy document for the council and the city. And considerable amount of work is taking place. The aim is that there will be a draft of that early in the new year. That will obviously entail engagement, and also the work that has been taking place to date by the Housing Policy Committee task and finish meetings will inform that work, and ultimately it is my understanding that that will take views from the Housing Policy Committee and endorsement for some areas of the Housing Policy Committee, and that will make its way to Strategy and Resource Committee during 24-25 as early as possible.
Right, thanks. Charlotte.
Early New Year, is there actually a timeline? Because early New Year to me is January. But early New Year might just be in the first quarter. If we can pin something, can we have a timeline of all this about when these bits are going to happen?
Would it be helpful if we set out a timeline, an expected timeline and approval process for the housing strategy and circulate that to members? There are, obviously, it's a key strategic strategy for the city, and just to make sure that the plan that we are working to, and also, to ensure that that is aligned with plans of the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council as well.
Right, okay, so the action there is that, Janet, you'll circulate a timeline that's currently believed to be right for the housing strategy. Okay, that's a good point there. Barbara, you want to come in the work plan?
Thank you. It's just to clarify this standing items. Can it be made clear in there, which I assumed it's going to be, that we're going to have very brief updates on work in hand, as we discussed under sort of Paul's suggestion, please? can it be specified? Thank you.
Right. Now, I think on the petition, that was a specific petition where we want a report on the update. So, and you remember that we said we need to invite the petitioner to come to that meeting. So that needs to be a separate item on the agenda. Yeah. So the consequence of what we decided earlier on about dealing with the petition is that we need to ask Rachel to add that as an item on the work plan. It might be quite a short item, but it does need to be on the work plan for the January meeting as a standalone item. You know, to be fair, out of all respect to the petitioner.
But I also thought that we were discussing about whether sort of, you know, we could have just quick ongoing updates about work in hand. So have I misunderstood what was part and parcel of that?
I think you misunderstood, yes. Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
Right, well, if we've got any more suggestions for what needs to go on the work plan, let's... are you suggesting there's another item goes on the work plan?
The discussion sort of involved sort of, you know, sort of the pest control policy, which would affect the whole city. The updates on sort of damp and mould, that would affect the whole city. There were the two main items which came out of the discussion about the petition. But I thought we'd agreed that it was quite useful just for housing to be able to give us a quick overview. Oh, by the way, this is happening, this is what we've done, as a regular item, not a detailed account at all. Yeah, so that, because I think one of the problems is the communication. We don't know, which is why it was such a shock, the actual depth of the work. And also you were saying that you've done a lot of work in the background, which we weren't aware of until today. So it's to overcome those sorts of issues. Very, very brief statements about anything that would affect the whole city and housing stock. Thank you.
Right, so let's just see where we are. So we dealt with the petition earlier, that needs to be on the plan. We've dealt with damp and mould, and we've agreed now that that comes to March's committee. With the wider issues about pest control throughout our blocks, we don't have that on the work plan. I think we probably need to think about where we go with that. As Rob has just advised, formally the agenda is down to my call. So I suggest what we do is that we do ask for a briefing on the work that's being undertaken on that, and then we reconsider whether that needs to go on the work plan as an additional item at some point. So that's what I'm proposing that we do.
It wasn't for the work plan, it was just a little item under the standing items, so that we automatically had a slot for it if it was relevant. Okay, yeah. Now that's a different issue. That's a governance issue. That's not what we're dealing with now. This item is the work plan. What we need to work out, in short, is what actually what you want to discuss on the agenda for January and March.
I don't know, on voids, it's progressing, or on damp and mould, it is not progressing, just so that it's kept on the agenda so that people know what is happening. It's not massively complicated, or Paul wouldn't have proposed it. So that's all
Shona,
it's asking for.
Can we move on? I mean, I think we are moving into governance issues about how
No, it's not a governance issue. It's just something really practical that members have agreed. But I don't think you quite cottoned on to it, Douglas.
So, just to assist the
assist
the committee
ask Rob to advise.
Moving forward. So it's a matter for the chair to settle what agenda items are on, including standing items, and with actually the board, the perhaps in consultation outside of the committee with the rest of the committee. So we wouldn't fix it by way of resolution in this committee what the future agendas are. It sounds like there's been a lively discussion about the usefulness of such an item, but I would suggest it's for outside the committee to fix standing items. The work programme is where specific matters are fixed, and that can be by resolution of the committee. So perhaps if the discussion and those compelling points either way are reflected on, it would be for outside the committee, and maybe today's business can move forward.
So does that mean that what was proposed and agreed by the committee hasn't been agreed?
No.
Doug, are you saying no?
Sorry, which particular item are you talking about here, Shona?
Councillor Turpin moved, and Councillor Milana seconded, and we all agreed that we would like to have on this committee that we would pilot a standing order that just goes on every committee agenda, giving updates where you don't need a report on something, but it's something that the committee had been concerned about, that you might just put in, by the way, that petition you had, X has happened to it, or that question that you had, Y has been done to it. And it wouldn't be a major piece of work, just a small updating for the committee to note.
Let's move on. We're looking at the particular petition. People wanted to keep on talking about the petition. The petition, we said, can come back on the agenda. A general update on everything to do with housing is, yeah. Let's move on from that. I think, as Rob has advised, it's the chair's call on actually what goes on the agenda, apart from specific items that can be resolved now. So we've got the specific item dealing with that specific petition. I think we need to move on.
So does that mean that the committee isn't allowed to suggest anything,
I think we
Mr.
need to be clear about what is being proposed as opposed to a general update on general things. And there are no other outstanding petitions at the moment. I think that's the point. If there were, then it might be slightly different. Right, okay. That's been confusing. Sorry, Paul. Do you want to put your mic on?
This committee isn't the only route to get information. And while mice and rat infestations is a concerning issue, it's not something that needs to be raised at every committee meeting, I don't think, and members can get that information regularly outside of the committee and use it as they wish.
Yeah, thanks. And that's what I propose we have a briefing on it so that we all get up to speed, and then maybe people can make more informed contributions to this. So, okay, let's see where we are. So we've added to the work plan the specific petition. We've got the damp and mould update in March. I just want to flag up, there were a couple of referrals from full council meetings, so I'm simply going to ask Rachel to look into that from Democratic Services. We just need to check the record exactly what was agreed at full council. And then final point is that at the Strategy and Resources Committee yesterday, there were the actions on the climate statements that were worked up through each committee to a certain extent, and which people here had some input to, all very helpful, that they need to come back to committees, and therefore we'll need to schedule those in the work programme. Probably best if I liaise with Rachel about when that can be done, but just so we don't lose sight of it. Right, okay. I'm sorry it's been a bit tortuous. Are we okay to move on from that? I think formally we need to agree the recommendations there on page 18. Despite everything that's been said, are people happy to agree the recommendations there? To take that as affirmed? Yeah, okay. No dissent. So we'll take that as agreed unanimously. Right, we have kind of laboured this point a bit. We're now on to the substance of the meeting. I know you do all like to talk. Budget monitoring report. So, Jane, if you'd like to come up to the front desk, maybe get your name card back, formally introduce yourself for the record, and then if you take us briefly through the budget monitoring report. So, there are 4 items here. I'm going to assume that people have read the papers. They're all publicly available. Nothing's excluded from the public. They're actually all for noting rather than approving on this one. So I'm hoping that we can get through this without having to extend the meeting. Obviously, if people do want to spend more time talking, we can extend the meeting, but we'll try and keep this fairly brief if we can. With that introduction, yeah, thank you, Jane. Would you like to introduce the report on budget monitoring?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Head of Accounting. The paper gives an update on the Q2 budget monitoring position for 23-24. The last committee's update was on September on the Q1 position. At Q2, the Council's forecasting an overspend in the General Fund of 17.4 million against a net revenue budget of 487 million, which is a variance of 3.6%. The Q1 position was 17.6 million, so not a huge movement between quarters, but there was a big movement of 2 million in the Education, Children and Families Committee due to recognition that income from health for integrated commissioning activities will not be achieved within the financial year. This 2 million was largely offset through our capital financing budget. Economic conditions continued to yield strong returns on investments, and slippage in the capital programme delayed our need for borrowing and strengthened the cash position, so interest has been good again this year. The three main areas of overspend for the council are adult social care, children's social care and homelessness. In adults, we've seen a big investment bringing down the average cost of care following the spike that we saw in the pandemic, but services continue to be challenged by increasing demand and an inflating cost base. In children's, we've got challenges from rising costs of placement, somewhat caused by limited supply in the city, alongside a shortage of foster carers to support the demand. We've also got rising costs of home-to-school transport. The homelessness situation has arisen post-lockdown, coupled with a shortage of affordable housing in the city and a limited range of options. Our use of hotel and bed and breakfast accommodation has reached an unsustainable and unaffordable level. The increase in homelessness is a national issue, and there are now more than 100,000 households in temporary accommodation, which is the highest level for 20 years. The Housing Committee is forecast to overspend by 3.2 million in the Housing General Fund against a net revenue budget of 11.2 million. The overspend relates to the loss incurred through supporting households in temporary accommodation. DWP legislation caps the limit on the amount that we can claim for housing benefit, leaving a subsidy shortfall for the council. This totals 4.9 million for this year, with some reduction in the outturn by applying homelessness grants totalling 1.7 million. In 2019, there were 69 households in temporary accommodation, 26 in hotels, and this is now 679 households, of which 312 are in hotels. When we're using our own stock for temporary accommodation, the housing costs are fully recoverable through housing benefit. The Housing Solutions Service are urgently reacting to the issue by implementing practices relating to prevention to attempt to reduce demand, minimising placement durations, investigating private sector capacity and leasing options to increase the supply of suitable accommodation, reducing the voids of our own stock, minimising void time of TA stock through prioritising repairs in these properties. Regular meetings are held with core cities and DLUC homelessness specialist advisors. Numbers in TA have increased significantly nationally, and councils are experiencing the same issues and sharing strategies to reduce the demand and the financial burden. The housing revenue account is forecast to overspend by 1.9 million against budget this year. The Q1 position was $500,000. The biggest issues that we face in the HRA relate to the loss of rent from vacant properties and significant costs in the repairs and maintenance budgets due to increases in cost of equipment, materials and subcontractor costs. Disrepair claims are also still high, but improvements are in place to reduce these claims and further cost escalations. Of the 5 million BIPs that were put in place as part of the 23-24 budget, only 1.6 are on track to be delivered in the housing area. 1.5 of this relates to repairs and maintenance that will not be delivered, alongside the reduction in void rent loss. The rest of the council's BIPs, the 47 million that we put in place last year, are currently 80% on track to deliver, with a further 12% to be delivered next year. The issues faced in Sheffield are not unique, and councils across the country are experiencing the same challenges in financial context. We've seen 4 local authorities in the past 12 months declare insolvency, issuing 114 notices, Nottingham being the most recent name, austerity being the underlying cause of a lot of the financial distress. Sheffield City Council has been able to manage the overspends against the budget by drawing from reserves from the past 2 years, and will do so again this year if no further mitigations are brought forward. We set aside 70 million of our reserves in 21 for budget contingency, and we'll have 13 remaining by the end of the year. But reserves can only be used once, and ours are depleting as our overspends continue. The autumn statement offered no reassurance from government that there will be any additional funding for local authorities. The medium-term financial analysis was presented in September, and it highlighted a 61 million budget gap, with 18 falling next year. Services have been developing solutions and have brought forward to recent policy committee meetings. All committees will make their final decisions in December. Consultation on existing proposals and the overall budget will need to take place, and the impact of the local government financial settlement, which will be announced next week, will need to be assessed. On the 21st of December, Strategy and Resources will be asked to make a recommendation on the savings and a follow-up on the 24th of January to make the recommendations to Council on the HRA, followed by the budget report on the 21st of February to recommend the General Fund budget to Council. The Council must continue to drive the delivery of budgets in year and savings plans to tackle those in-year overspends to prevent that budget gap from widening. The committee is asked to note the Council's financial position as at Q2 for 23-24. The Q3 position will be presented to committees in March. Thank you.
Jane, thank you for that possibly bleak and challenging outlook on local government finances. But yeah, so some challenges there. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the big issues for this committee are repairs, which we are talking about all the time and on top, and then homelessness. And just to remind committee members that the issue about the cost of temporary accommodation is one that we were planning to have as an item on for this agenda, but we've just agreed from the work plan to move it to the January meeting that we will have. So thanks very much for that, Jane. As you said, it presents the picture, it's for the record, it is formally for noting. Any burning questions on this? Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's just clarification. 1.7.9 on page 39, tenant services. I can see where that you've offset to account for the 1.5 million, but because it's such sort of a general term, tenant services, it says it's overspend, offset by lower charges. Which bits are particularly sort of overspending to be offset by this 1.5 million? Do you know?
Sorry, but which was the reference there?
1.7.9.
1.7.9, yes.
Bottom of page 39.
Yeah, it's just clarification, really.
Committee papers.
Jane, are you able to answer that one? What's tenant, or is this one for Janet? I think the question is, what does tenant services cover?
So I'm just reading the text there, just reminding myself of that particular bit. I apologise. Yeah. So it says there, so there's a variety of overspends in tenant services offset by lower recharges, capital management, fire safety, asset management programme, housing employability project, tenancy enforcement team, communal areas. Janet, I don't know whether you want to comment on the tenant services budgets in general. I think there's quite a lot of vacancies in some of those teams following a lot of work that you've been doing in terms of sort of looking at the service and stabilising the sort of the resources in place to support the services that we deliver. So I think a lot of the smaller teams that are included in that, so some of those are mentioned there, they've got a few vacancies that are carried forward. So I think that's kind of the reason for some of the underspend there. I don't know if Jared's got any further information.
Yes, certainly, and I think it's probably no surprise to the committee that we have some significant challenges in recruiting specialist staff within housing. Some of that are national issues, particularly, in terms of technical, non-technical specialists, obviously housing individuals who are needed to support our homeless life service. So we are facing some significant challenges on our recruitment. Colleagues in our human resources team are spending quite a lot of time with us looking about how we recruit, but also how we use apprentices, hire apprentices within the service to be able, so we can, build the skill sets we need moving forward. So what you will see within that section of the report, obviously, is where we are spending a lot of time trying to recruit the skills that we need to deal with the pressures that we face, not only in housing, but across, obviously, in terms of how we deliver our capital programme, and also Tom's raised previously in terms of, the repair service and recruiting the people with the required qualifications. The tenant services line in the HRA business plan not only covers obviously the housing teams, but also all of those other services, grants maintenance, supports costs from our finance, our legal, contact centre, and all of those services that enable us to deliver these services. So a detailed breakdown of what's included in the tenant services can be provided. The other thing is that what we agreed to do this year is obviously to make sure we are recovering on our recharges. And also that includes challenges from customers, you know, in terms of the level of charges that we're passing to them and that. So we have to follow that formal process to make sure we are listening to our tenants, and if they are raising valid points, that time takes, and sometimes that can delay recovering the costs.
Thank you. Okay, so tenant services, quite a wide range of services that provide tenants. Thanks. Sinead.
Right, page 35, the budget implementation group, working group.
Sorry, 45 is in a different report, Sinead.
Page 35.
35, okay.
The senior officer working group, I just wanted to know how frequently it meets, who monitors it, does it go through to S&R, and how do we know what it's worked, what comes out of it? That's one question.
We should deal with that first. It's a coherent question. Jane, can you answer who that is?
No, I know who it is. I just wanted to know how often it meets and what it's managed to do so far.
Sure. So it's chaired by the Director of Finance and Commercial Services, includes officers, senior officers, so scheduled monthly. Sometimes they happen more like a quarterly. At the beginning of the year, there was quite a lot of meetings towards the beginning of the year while we kind of got a grip of what the savings plans were in place and sort of what needed to be delivered, anything that needed to be unblocked to help delivery of some of the savings plans. Now some of the positions are stabilised a little bit more. It's more of a check-in really and a report back. And one of the other things that it talks about the transformation funding as well. Part of position, we'd identified some funding to support transformation, 4 million this year. We reviewed some business cases that were attached to delivery of savings as part of that group, and some of those business plans were recommended to performance and delivery group to sort of support that savings delivery. They're also monitored and report to the performance and delivery board.
Right, thanks, yeah.
Sounds exciting. On page 37, 1.7.2, where it says urgent action must be taken, what is the urgent action being taken? And I just wanted to ask about, I know, because I get to sub for lots of committees, on the Education Committee, they were talking about some housing costs which they bear when they're trying to keep families together to prevent children going into care. And they thought that that was actually a housing cost that ought to be borne by housing and not by children's services. And I just wanted to check that you've all actually talked about that so that you've both decided who is actually bearing that cost, and it's not one of those ones where a committee says, oh, we've made a budget saving, and hasn't actually asked the committee that they're pushing that saving onto, whether that's okay or not.
Yes, it's fair to say other members of the committee have discussed that. It might be something that Janet wants to come back on, but Jane, is there anything to say from your point of view?
Sure. On the education, children, I'm vaguely aware of that issue, but you're right to mention it, and I certainly will take that back to the team and make sure that we're following up, that we're not pushing, you know, one budget problem into a different area of the council, and we're actually trying to resolve that overall. I think sometimes there is confusion when we're supporting children and families, and you know, and it's a similar sort of issue, and it's kind of understanding where the statutory duty arises, and therefore which budget area should support that. So I know it has been picked up. I'm not quite sure where we are with the work, but certainly we can bring that back and answer that question for you in further detail. In terms of the urgent issues for the homelessness housing solutions team that they're working on, I think a lot of this will be detailed in the paper that Suzanne Allen, the head of housing solutions, will be presenting in January. Some of that is about, you know, there's further work on prevention strategy to reduce the demand, looking at the private sector capacity, looking at the void stock that we've got at the moment, expediting the repairs work on the voids that we've got in place for the current TA stock. We've got capital programmes that we are looking to progress in terms of building new TA accommodation or potentially acquiring other property. So there's a whole lot of work that's happening and that will be set out in an action plan that will be presented to committee in January. There is also a piece of work that's happening to make sure that we're monitoring our performance on this. That will be reporting to the Performance and Delivery Board. You're right, it's a very exciting meeting and reports on a lot of the urgent issues that we need to respond to as the council. So in terms of setting out what the key sort of things that we can do in the short term to reduce some of the financial loss can be and really progressing some of those actions. So there is a lot of work that's going on for officers across the council to knit this together to try and drive some of those actions. But I think, again, in the paper that Suzanne will be bringing in January, she talks about the national context as well. And whilst it is, quite concerning here in Sheffield, it is just as bad, if not worse, in a lot of other authorities. And I think there's a lot of learning that we can do from other authorities, particularly we've been speaking to colleagues in Manchester, so our financial friends in Manchester, but also housing friends in Manchester, to see what they're doing and how they're sort of responding to the issue. But again, it's a national issue that we need to be lobbying for, and I think members in other authorities have been sort of quite vocal about this because it's a really, really significant issue.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
We certainly don't want to be in a Nottingham situation with our HRA, do we? Under 1.7.9, which Councillor Masters had already raised, but the bit that concerned me, I guess, was vacancies in fire safety, because we're all just horribly conscious of what happened in London and it, in other places since. And is this, Janet, I think, did you say this is because specialised staff are difficult to recruit? Or, because I'd hate to think that we were using it as a saving, if you like, by having vacancies, and that by putting tenants at risk.
Yeah. Janet, do you want to answer that?
No, just to reassure you, we are not putting tenants at risk. So one of the things we are doing, following obviously the new regulations, is putting, agreed with committee, obviously putting the team in place, moving forward, that is about obviously the building issues, but is also about new responsibilities in terms of how we work with our tenants who live in high-risk buildings as well. So as part of that, you will appreciate that every local authority in the country, including the fire service, are trying to recruit very specialist individuals. What we are doing in the short term is we are supplementing, obviously, where we have gaps with, external organisations who are supporting us in the short term, so that we make sure that we have got people who obviously are qualified to do the work that we need to do. And we've also done a bit of reorganisation within my own service to be able to do that and obviously reach out to other services to help and support us. But it is key that we have the team in place to be able to really drive and move this forward. What we have here is an in-year sort of saving in terms of, because some of the people have not been recruited to the key positions. But for 24-25 onwards, the budgets that are required to make sure we've got that full complement of staff have been embedded in the HRA business plan. So this is all but a one-off, a saving in year that's helping to help with the overall balancing of the account. But also, I think it's flagging an issue that not just for asset management and repairs, that there is lots of things. We have significant turnover in our homeless services and in other key service areas, because I think, it is just really difficult at times to secure specialist skills in the service. And that does mean that sometimes there will be cash flow issues between, obviously, financial years until we get people in post.
Right, thanks. Noting this report is just about monitoring, it's just about what's actually happened. If there have been vacancies, there have been vacancies. Also conscious of time, people spent a long time.
I've still got questions.
Have you still got questions? How many more questions have you got?
Oh, not that many, but, as a committee, this is what we're here to do, isn't it?
Yes, we're also here to do some other things.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Sorry, at 12 in don't think we do. Right, okay. Sean, did you ask more questions?
Yeah,
But, yeah, bear in mind that
Yeah.
other people are waiting too, and we've got the other items.
I know. My question on 1.7.14 was an underspend on community heating. Is that just because some prices have come down, or we've done it better, or why? It's not because we've turned down thermostats and frozen any of our tenants, is it?
Brief answer from someone?
Just the energy that's been used, and obviously we recharge for the energy that is used, and there has been also, you know, some better than anticipated, you know, in terms of what we're paying out as well, and obviously we pass that on to tenants.
So it's self-balancing account, isn't it? So there'll be some credit for tenants.
Final question in this section. Voids. I mean, that's a perennial issue, I know, and we know that when we have so many voids, it means that our homeless families or any families who need to move can't get into them. What is going to be our key strategy for driving down voids? Is it going to be more staffing on it, or, you know, at the moment, is it because the voids are very, very difficult buildings to mend or to service? Why is it such a difficult issue?
Ken, just interrupt. I mean, I'll perhaps ask Tom to respond briefly on that. I mean, bear in mind that this is stuff that the permanent members of the committee have been going over in some detail at briefings, and that is part of the idea to take this out of the meeting. But Tom, could you answer briefly, because it is an important question.
I mean, very briefly, it's a mixture of things, Councillor Richard. So we have got a number of properties where the repairs are larger than we probably would expect them to be. But there is a lot of work going on across housing and repairs. In fact, we've brought together the housing and repairs voids functions into one place at Manor Lane, and now co-located, to get the process much slicker from the point of keys coming back to the point of it being rented. And some of it is just about how we, you know, the practicalities of how we're actually passing information between those two teams, which we hope will really bear down on things. There is a plan that sits behind all that. We can share that outside of the meeting, Councillor Richards. Lots and lots of detail associated with the voids work there.
Thanks very much. Roughly, yeah. John, can we give Nabila a go? Over to you, Nabila.
Thank you, Chair. I'll save most of my questions for the repairs report, but the one thing I did want to pick up on is what you mentioned, Janet, about the skills shortage and, you know, how we're trying to recruit. I know previously in this committee we've spoken about the role of the Economic Skills and Development Committee and the work they're doing and how we'll tie in with it. To my knowledge, there's been no, I suppose, formal arrangement or formal proposals made to the ESD committee. And I was just wondering, do we know when these conversations will be progressing? Because it is, you know, a very pressing issue on ESD side. It's a strategic priority for us as the council, and obviously has a direct material impact on the housing services we provide.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure. So the question is about, have conversations taken place between whom?
The housing committee, between the housing team and the economic skills and development teams,
It's
which
about,
we said we'd do.
yeah, getting new people into jobs.
About skills.
Okay, yes, all right.
We are doing quite a lot of detailed work in terms of the housing workforce strategy moving forward, and I have obviously regular meetings with senior managers within the council's housing HR department. So one of the things that we have been also doing is looking at where we are struggling to recruit, but also struggling, you know, of sometimes qualified people coming from the colleges and things, and have we got the right courses being undertaken, and how can we marry what our needs for the future are, comparing in terms of what skills we have in the service, but also where we are struggling to recruit. So the work we are doing is we're doing jointly with HR. I need to probably pick up then how that work is informing the work of the committee, the skills committee, and I'm happy to take that that away. But certainly both housing and repairs are doing an awful lot of work working with HR colleagues to make sure we've got the skill sets that we need moving forward. And as you will see in terms of the some of the wider housing context about obviously promoting specific qualifications for housing staff going forward as that. So that's all embedded within our workforce strategy moving forward. And obviously that's a key part of the HRA business plan for 24-25 as well.
Right, thanks very much. Okay, you're going to be... final question, I think, from Penny.
Very quickly, Chair. Hi. Properties that are on the disposal list still listed as voids?
So they have been, but one of the things that we have done is we've been taking those out of the numbers now, and the reason for doing that is because the agreements that we reached at the committee was to formally dispose of those properties. That report was approved, and property services are making steps even now to be able to dispose of some of those units. So once we got that formal approval through the council's committee system, obviously one of the things we are then able to do is take them out of debit.
Thanks very much. Right, okay. If we look at the recommendations, they are on page 29. Asked you to note the information. Is everyone happy to do that? Yep, nods there. Thanks very much for that, Jane. Appreciated. Shall we crack on to the next item, which is the capital report? Sorry, which I'm assuming Dean is presenting. Jane, you may be staying for that. Dean, shall I hand over to you just to present this? I guess, again, we've got the written report. We've read it. If you can summarise just the key points there, and then we'll take the questions and then crack on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to be very brief with this report because everybody's had it for information. It's the routine report that we bring every cycle for this. Just one of the main things that I do want to bring to people's attention, if you look at section 2.1 in the report, you'll see a significant movement from the Q1 expected expenditure within the report of 124 million to the Q2 position of 102 million. They're predominantly for two particular reasons. The first one is the slippage within the external wall insulation scheme in our area programme. We've got some procurement complications in relation to that scheme that means that the start on site won't commence this current financial year, and it will move on to into the 24 year, not too far within the 24-25 financial year, very early within Q1 of that year. The other one relates to, and we've had these conversations on a regular basis about our roofing contractor, Avonside, going into administration, and the length of time that it's taken to procure a new roofing contractor to undertake that piece of work. One of the challenges that we've had in relation to that is that with cost inflation, from going out to the original procurement with Avonside, to them going into administration, to then going back out to procurement, the cost of the contract has increased significantly from one contractor to the next contractor. So there's some significant issues there in relation to the spend that we've got. But apart from that, Chair, I'm quite happy to take any questions in relation to the report.
Right, thanks so much, Dean. I don't think anyone's indicated any questions. Yes, they have. I think Nabila has. Good. Okay, that will save time. Nabila.
Thank you, Chair. So it's just on page 52. It says, well, 51, 52, it says, at the very end, it says, by the end of September 2023, the following outputs were achieved, and it mentions a number of figures. So 1,132 asbestos surveys undertaken, 1,598 homes now receiving electrical updates and are now compliant with the electrical safety regulations. I was wondering if you could tell us, out of how many homes is this? And does that mean that, if 1,598 homes are now compliant with electrical safety regulations, I'd like to know, I suppose, how many homes are still yet to be made compliant? And just a very similar running theme. I think it lists figures for each item, but it doesn't tell us how much is yet to be done.
Dean, yes, over to you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to our compliance figures, we'll be bringing back future reports in relation to how compliant we are within every part of our regulatory compliance areas. But in relation to asbestos, I can clearly say that Every one of our properties requires an asbestos survey. So at the moment, we've got around about 38,600 homes. Out of those homes, we've currently got 60 reports that are outstanding, so we are virtually 100% compliant. Those 60 homes are homes where we're failing to get access to those properties, and it's persistent no access to those that we're having to seek legal remedy to actually get into those particular properties. In relation to the electric programme, there's probably around about 9,000 homes that haven't got a current electric certificate that is within a 10-year programme. The old regulations are about to change, so it used to be that as long as you had a home that had an electric programme within 10 years, you were compliant. That is about to move this in 24-25, that every home has to have an electric certificate within 5 years. So what we're putting in place is a robust programme that will say that by the time we get to 26-27, all of our homes will be compliant within a 5-year programme.
Thank you very much. Right. Any other questions? Can we just do the recommendations then on page 45 and go to 6? So it's essentially noting the capital programme forecasting and the budget position and the update for the 5-year capital programme. Everyone happy with that? Right. Thanks very much. Let's move on. And thanks very much, Dean, for presenting that, and Jane for right. Should we move on to the performance reports? So we're on page 55, and I'm not sure who's speaking on that first of all. Is that Janet, or Janet and or Tom?
Yeah, this is obviously a joint report from myself and Tom, which sets out obviously the housing performance report, you know, and hopefully the report is fairly self-explanatory, but Tom and I are happy to pick up any questions through the report. Is there anything you want to say?
Thanks. I think that's quite a helpful introduction. Unless there's anything burning to say, Tom, then as I said, we've got the report. It's in the standard format that we're getting used to. So questions now. I think Barbara's the first one with questions.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, sort of listening to the tenant's voice the other day, sort of there seems to be a disconnect between what they're experiencing and what we're told in committee, and we know full well the statistics cover sort of huge issues. Now, one of the things is, I mean, I listed the things that seem to concern them most. First of all, the first point of contact with the services, they felt that was sort of poor, so they couldn't get across what they need to be done. The second thing was sort of general communications, and it's touching that, like you were saying about the petition, that you've done a lot of work. And a lot of the tenants don't seem to be aware of any background work that's being done, and it'd be nice if they could be informed of sort of, you know, sort of an ongoing sort of progress. The other thing was sort of, they were very concerned about checking the quality of repairs. They're saying, well, we've been told it's been signed off, but look, sort of it's just not worked properly. So how do you check that the repairs have been sort of effected correctly? Is there sort of some kind of sort of quality assurance type of thing? And the other point is that they were saying that sometimes a tradesman would come on a tiny job that the tradesman was in the capabilities of the tradesman to do. He had the tools, or she had the tools, and everything necessary, but they've then got to sign it in as a fresh job. And is it possible that there is sort of someone they could refer to say, I'm on the premises, I've got everything that's needed, it will take so many minutes, can I have authorisation to do the job? Because we know full well they've got to have authorisation, otherwise it's a free-for-all. So I think they're the main things that sort of, that came, to me, resonated from that meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, yes, Tom, if you want to come in. I think it's fair to say that. Also, just to, so that you know, that, so Vicky Kennedy from the Tenant Engagement Service has got slightly more detailed notes of that particular feedback, but those are good points, 2 good points there that Barbara raises.
Thanks, Councillor Masters. No, and I've had some feedback from that meeting as well, directly from some other members who were at the meeting as well. So, and I don't think there's too many surprises, if I'm really honest, in terms of what's coming out of there. And the things you've raised are things that we are really focused on as a service, because we know we're not in the right place with some of that stuff. So, first point of contact with services, the reality is most of the contact we still get is via the contact centre. on the telephone lines. A huge amount of work, as members will hopefully know, going into our future customer strategy and how we make that whole interaction much, much better in the future. We haven't got a good online offer, for an example, at the moment. We have an online offer, but it's not really where it needs to be, and that does mean we get more phone calls than we should do. It means that actually people wait on phones longer than they need to actually for simple repairs. So there's a huge amount of work going in to try to improve that first contact thing, and it will be a priority for the council actually as a whole in terms of that first contact thing over this next 6 to 12 months. General communications, yeah, really good point in terms of, I think there are limitations both in terms of how the repairs service sometimes communicates about individual jobs, but actually the broader stuff in terms of investment in properties and what we're doing into the future to improve things, and so completely take that on board. Quality assurance, we have a quality assurance team within the repair service who follow up jobs and follow up a sample of jobs on a consistent basis. What we also do is where we get poor customer feedback, so we do customer surveys after every repair. If a customer says they weren't happy with the way in which that repair was carried out, again, the quality assurance team follow that up, and they follow up with the individual member of staff, but also often actually go and look at the quality of the repair that was undertaken in the property. So we've actually got fairly robust quality assurance within the service in terms of following up repairs. It's never going to cover everything because we can't check every repair we do, but we do have those systems and processes in place. And then your final point in terms of tradespeople and small jobs, we've been really quite clear actually with our tradespeople that if they can do it, they should just do it. So I appreciate your position, what you're saying in terms of some authorisation. Of course, if a job is, really huge, if it's going to take 3 hours instead of half an hour, we would want them to ring their team leader and say, are you all right with that? Can you reschedule my other job so that I can do this? But actually, we've been really clear with our frontline teams that if it's a job they can do, they need to try to do it. And our right first time statistics are improving. We're above, I think this last month, the first time we're above 90% of repairs being done on first visit. It just hasn't been like that for the last 2 years. So the trajectory is good, but we're still getting similar feedback, Council Master. So we're really focused on trying to improve that area. That's useful.
Thanks, that's quite a helpful description of what's going on there. Okay, so more questions. So go to Nabila first, then Penny, then back to Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report, Tom. I'm understandably, as I'm sure everyone on committee is, I'm very worried that we're still not completing, I suppose, enough repair jobs a week when I think demand is at something like 2,700 a week, but we're at 45% for completing repairs on time in terms of planned repairs for this quarter. And I know we're hiring a new team at the moment. I suppose I have two questions. The first one is this enough, and is there anything else that you need from us to be able to support you to improve these numbers? And the second question is, I know we've commissioned a review of the service and now we've appointed the organisation who will be undertaking this. Do we have a timeline of when this will be coming to fruition and when members and the public will be able to feed into it? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Tom?
Yeah, so there's lots within that conversation about demand, and it's probably almost a bit too much to unpick today, if I'm honest with you, because there's all sorts going on in there. There is the resource issue. There is the fact that we are trying to increase the resource in the service, but there is a cost to that, as an example, and we're very conscious of the balance between cost and just throwing lots and lots of additional resource at things. But if you take something like working at height, we've been working very hard with our subcontractors to increase their capacity to deliver more work, especially over the winter months, so that we don't get into the spring in a worse position than we went into it. So we've actually mobilised a significant amount of additional resource literally in the last 2 or 3 weeks just on roofing and working at height repairs. Demand is clearly linked to our asset strategy and clearly linked to our investment in our stock. So, clearly as we bring forward through the new business plan more investment in the stock, that will start to bear down on demand as well. And then finally, in terms of demand, we're bringing forward a new repairs policy because it's fairly clear to us that we are, as a service, doing more in Sheffield than potentially other social housing providers do, both in Sheffield and outside of Sheffield. And some minor repairs where we're sending out skilled tradespeople to do them, it's actually would be better, more quick, better response and quicker response if tenants were empowered to do some of these things themselves, frankly, going forward. So there's lots in terms of demand. It's a mixture of all of those things, though. It's about doing the right things and prioritising the right things. It's about getting our investment in stock right and then getting our resource right. And then on top of all of that, it's being productive. And as we were saying earlier about the work that we're doing in service to try and get our frontline tradespeople as productive as they possibly can be, is an ongoing piece of work. Lots and lots of performance management stuff in place. We manage every individual tradesperson performance on a daily basis. We can see their productivity. We can see what they have and haven't done. So lots and lots of work in that space. So when you say is there more, obviously we would always say, well, of course, we'd love lots more things, but actually I think we've got quite a good plan in place in terms of both getting the additional resource we need, but actually really bearing down on demand, which is a trick, because this level of demand is too high for the amount of stock we've got comparative to other social housing providers. We simply shouldn't be getting this level of repairs through the system. So we need to reduce the demand if we can.
Thanks very much. That's a useful observation that we're getting more requests for repairs than you might expect for this number of properties. Okay. Nabila, that's your questions covered, isn't it? Did you... You look so you've got something to come back on, which might be important.
I suppose that raises a whole new kind of questions, which I'll probably have to keep for another time, given time, about, if we are getting more requests than we should be getting, is that because of the quality of our stock? Is that because of long-standing issues? And, I suppose what we're going to do as a whole city to address it. But the second question was about the review of the service. And now that we've appointed the organisation, do we have a time scale? Thank you, Chair.
So my understanding, that the review that's taking place is cross housing and repairs. It is due, I understand, to report back at the end of January. It will be engaging with a number of people between now and then. It will be very much a look at the operating model for the service at a fairly high level, though, I suspect, given those timescales. So there will be, when I suppose in terms of the timescale for implementation of the things that come out of that, clearly we'll get the report then January, but there will be more work required, I suppose, to implement whatever their findings are over a period of time, and we'll have to come back and put some realistic timescales into the committee and to other stakeholders in terms of how that will actually flow through in terms of the work required to change, if that's what's recommended.
Great, okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, go to Penny next.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting questions. A couple of sort of added extras that I know cause issues and complications. One of them is when the property below is damaged adjacent to the property where the initial problem is. So you've got a leak from the flat above, for example. It's the simple one. And then the person below reports it. The person in the flat that actually has an issue, we have access issues. Where do we go from there? Because it's a long-term problem. And so just to add to that, because I think you could probably answer it at the same time. Lately, I've had issues with people with disabilities who have had issues with mould and damp, and they're told to wash it down, and they physically are not capable of doing it. I've been looking to age concern. Is there anything we can do within the City Council to help and support those people?
Yeah, please, Tom.
Thanks, Councillor Baker. So, the access challenge is an ongoing one, and it's across the piece. So clearly damp and mould leaks from flats above, but we have access problems with people's own properties as well, where we know there are issues, but they sometimes don't let us in to deal with those for all sorts of issues, vulnerabilities, all sorts of things. The work that's happening in terms of tenancy agreements will start to try to address that. So we've taken a huge amount of legal advice as to what our powers are to be able to enter without permission if we need to. And, where a flat above another flat is leaking and causing a real problem to one underneath. Clearly, we ought to have some power to be able to enter that flat and undertake works without permission if necessary. The changes to the tenancy conditions will support that into the new year. So where there is a real problem being caused by somebody else's property, we should be able to enter and sort that out. And so it's coming in terms of that, in terms of us getting much more robust powers in place and levers in place to be able to solve that access problem. At the moment it's quite challenging given the legal advice we've currently got, and we need to change the tenancy conditions to enable us to do that much more robustly and quickly. But that is coming. In terms of people with disabilities, I think one of the things that we're reflecting through a lot on the damp and mould especially is that we need to get much better at identifying vulnerability actually in our prioritisation and our triage for jobs full stop. So not just damp and mould, but actually damp and mould is a very particular one where part and parcel of when somebody reports a damp and mould problem is we want to be starting to actually identify, you know, whether somebody has those sorts of vulnerabilities so we can deal with the job more quickly if needed, but we can put other wraparound support around them as well. And vulnerability could be financial vulnerability or disability or something else, but we need to try and identify those things so that we can appropriately support that particular tenant. If we have got tenants who are, you know, unable to do things like, you know, washing down properties and things like that, we can obviously do some initial work through the repair service, but on an ongoing basis, I think it's probably something we need to consider and part and parcel of the broader plan around damp and mould, just in terms of what, you know, that it's back to that wraparound support piece, isn't it? What other support can we give to tenants to enable them to live independently in their properties? And it might even be a conversation we need to have with colleagues in adult social care as well, around how do we enable people to remain in properties, you know, and give them the support that's required to do that if they can't do it themselves. So we can take that back as part and parcel of the damp and mould conversation we're having strategically. That's useful.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tom. Very helpful.
Thanks for that, Tom. Just to say to you, one lady who had problems with damp and mould in her porch was told it needed cleaning down with a special spray. And she said, well, I can't physically do that. And the operative said to her, well, you'll have to pay someone to do it for you, love. And I think she would have actually had problems to find somebody because she wasn't that switched on to do it. And I know work has been done on the response that operatives have given to tenants. And, you know, the condensation bit is not usually done anymore, and that is coming through. But I did feel that that was not a very good response to an elderly infirm person.
And for me personally, Councillor Baker, I don't feel that's a good enough response either, frankly. So, if you've got the details of that, I'm really happy to follow that one up. But it's not the general approach that I would expect our operatives to be taking, given the training and guidance they've had around damp and mould and the impact on our tenants.
One's not good enough, it doesn't do our reputation any good, does it?
Right, thanks. Yep, it's a good observation there. I'll actually bring in Alan because you've very kindly been quiet this meeting. But if you've got a question there.
Not really a question, it's a comment. I was in the same meeting as Barbara, and one of the things that came up was that they say operatives arrive, chuck a card through the letterbox and go and say, we've been, they're not in. I'd only been a councillor 5 weeks, I think, and I actually experienced that. This chap was waiting in to have gas certificate done. Twice they said they'd been. I went on the third occasion and sat in his house with him, and I was there through the window. The operative sitting in his van and then coming car through the door and go. 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I mean, it was a long time ago, and hopefully things have improved. But we were told in the same meeting that they hadn't. That was still happening.
So, Tom, has that practice been stamped out?
Yeah, I hope so. So this has been a really area of focus for the service. And, you know, it's a service of 600 people. So we will have some people in a service of that size who will not do a very good job, right? Let's be clear. But they are a small minority of people, actually. Vast majority of the tradespeople in the service do a really good job. We have put some things in place that should prevent that from happening. Might not prevent it always, but should prevent it from happening. So the first thing we have done is we have instructed all of our tradespeople that if there is a phone number on the file when they arrive at the property, they should ring the tenant on that phone number before they put any card through the door to say that the tenant is not in. So that is in place now. That should be happening consistently across the service. Secondly, if they put that card through the door, they should be taking a photograph of said front door and it should be being put on our system so that we can see that they were at the front door trying to get access to that property. So we also monitor for every individual operative their access rates, the number of, the proportion of jobs that they don't manage to get access to, and where we have outliers, so people with very high non-access rates, we are following that up robustly with those individuals, members of staff. So we've got some good systems and processes in place, Councillor Woodcock. I can't say, definitively we will get it right 100% of the time, because clearly with the staff complement, the size we've got, we won't. But I am hoping that is improving as we're going forward.
Right, thanks. I think a useful commitment there. Certainly useful to know, isn't it, that people should get a phone call before a card's left in. Does that answer?
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks. It's a good point to raise there. Shoned.
3.5 questions. On the repair volumes, the first thing, 2.1, we're on page 58, and it just says high demand has continued. I suppose the obvious question is why, and I think you touched upon that somewhat. Is it poor quality, is it coming to an time when our buildings are coming to an age where they aren't as good as they used to be? Or are people more demanding of, for instance, those of us, not Nabila, who remember growing up to have frost on the inside of their window panes, and that was just part of our lives. Whereas now, I have a son who expects to walk around in a t-shirt and shorts, when it's snowing outside. Is there a difference in perception of what people expect? Or is it just poor quality buildings starting to decay?
I would say that expectations are higher, and rightly so. So that would be my first comment on that. So if you take damp and mold's a really good example. So if we went back literally only 4 or 5 years, we would find that tenants were living with conditions that we potentially didn't really want them to be living with. And it's very clear when you look at our damp and mould and what we get through now, we are seeing a huge increase in reported damp and mould cases. And actually, whilst that puts pressure on the service, we should be seeing that, shouldn't we? Because we need to deal with it. I would say, clearly there are some archetypes across the city that are starting to get quite tired in terms of their general maintenance. And as I say, the increase in the stock condition investment, hopefully over this next few years, will start to address that, especially through things like roofing programmes is a good example, and walkways on some of our properties. You will know these places, flat roofs, flat walkways. These are the places where we have lots and lots of damp and mould issues and lots of issues with roofs. So hopefully the stock investment will start to address that as we go forward. And I think it's probably mainly a combination of those two things, actually.
Thanks a lot, yeah.
What percentage of our operatives are multi-skilled, and are we intending that to be an upward rising trend?
So I can't tell you the specific percentage. What I would say to you is probably not enough. So it is something we're looking at. It's quite, in theory, it's simple. In practice, it's quite challenging. So if I just say to one of the things we struggle with a lot is, so you have a gas engineer goes out or a plumber goes out, they fit a radiator, they want to fit a radiator, but they then need a joiner to come along and do some battening or something to put a radiator on a wall. We should be able to get our gas fitters to a stage where they can put some wooden battening on a wall in order to fit a radiator. So that's not, we wouldn't probably call that multi-skilled necessarily in a job description sense. We would just say, let's give some of our staff a few additional skills so that they can finish a job. So we're doing a lot of work on that internally within the service. We probably do need more general multi-skilled people, though, who can go in and do a range of different minor jobs in properties, and we are trying to increase that. It's kind of easier in theory sometimes, though it is in practice. I'll be honest.
We've talked about expecting tenants to do more what we call minor repairs, putting doors back on cupboards and things like that. And I sort of think, yeah, I could do some of those and others I probably couldn't. And we've been having this debate about whether there still is a sort of a handy person service. Some people have said, oh, it's stopped now, and then others have said, no, we've still got it. And is that something that tenants can call on to do those sorts of things if they're not able to do it?
Absolutely. So that service still exists. And when we're talking about the repairs policy, when we come back to committee, that will be a key area, obviously, in supporting vulnerable people still to get things done. You know, we talk about things like toilet seats. You know, we currently will go out and we'll replace toilet seats. Clearly, if somebody can't do that, there is a handy person service that will be able to support that sort of thing.
And final question, on page 61, 3.3, about managing arrears, and we know that at Christmas it's the time when rent isn't quite as important as buying Christmas presents. We're going to buy Tom a jumper, I think. Do we have any sort of campaigns to sort of encourage people to consider that paying your rent is actually a bit more important than the other Christmassy activities?
Yeah, yes, certainly. And one of the things that we do throughout the year is obviously work with people, obviously, who are struggling to pay their rent. We have obviously, you know, a successful track record, obviously, of supporting people. We have hardship. We also triage with other cost of living support as well for our families, you know, so that we make sure. And also the way we charge rent, where you have obviously a number of rent-free weeks during the period to recognise that. But one of the things that the team, we go out this time of the year now and have been for a while, you know, to make sure that people are being able to meet any payment plans for any arrears, and also, you know, that their rent's due and how important it is. So there is lots of communications in this space. But one of the things that we do benefit from is really good customer insight, to understand people who we proactively contact to make sure they're coping, but also to make sure people are getting the benefits that they're entitled to, and also joining up all of the various support that is out there and available, not just obviously through the housing hardship support, council tax support, rebate support, and all of those like things to support people during this what is a very difficult period. And we've had that in place not just for the Christmas period, but throughout the year, you know, particularly, you know, because we want people to be able to afford to put their heating on, but also to be able to be healthy in their homes and make sure that they can afford their household bills as well. And we've really had to step up our support for tenants to make sure, you know, we're there to help people, and particularly triage that with our tenancy management visits. So often, you know, officers will go in and think, actually, this looks really serious, that somebody's in serious hardship here, and make sure obviously we've got that intelligence and work with other services as well to make sure we're triaging support.
Thanks very much for that.
Just sort of, you know, when Tom said about the review, which Nabila asked him, and he said he's because it's going to report back in January, he didn't think it would do much more than look at upper bits. Are you saying it's going to be, to use slang, a swift and dirty review rather than a deep dive review?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think probably if I was, I think probably it's a question we need to take out of this committee, actually, Councillor Richards, to be honest. So I'm very, very conscious that actually myself and John are part of the review to some extent. And really, it's probably a question for Ajman as the exec director who's commissioned that review in terms of what his expectations are and what is coming out of that. My understanding is it won't be quick and dirty because they're seeing a lot of people, and I've seen the calendar in terms of the number of people they're trying to engage with between now and the end of January. So I think it will be a robust and detailed piece of work. I think probably the product, in a sense, is probably more of a question for Ajman than either myself or Janet at this stage.
Apologies for getting the layer wrong.
Right. So thanks very much there. So just to wrap this up, there's a couple of things I need to say. So first of all, I wouldn't want to go out from this committee that we're suggesting any way that, the council tenants are reckless and, spend their money on festivities and having fun instead of paying the rent. That's definitely not the message we're saying here, is it, John? And I think actually we need to recognise that, a lot of people will face a lot of hardship over Christmas. So, we need to have some thought with them. We've got the recommendations on this, which again are to note the report. It's on page 56. So I think for the record, that is noting the performance report in item 1. Delete paragraph 2. That's not a resolution for the committee. Everyone happy with that? Yeah, I think so. So we'll note that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then third thing I just need to say now is we've spent a lot of time discussing things. We need to extend time to deal with the housing revenue account. Can we extend this for up to 30 minutes? Not. No, it's okay. This happens. Okay, thanks very much. In that case, let's move on to the final item, which is the housing revenue account. So, Janet, I guess that's over to you again.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. So the report you have in front of you is the annual review of the housing revenue account. And as you will be aware, this is a piece of work that we do throughout the year, but we bring to committee an annual report that obviously reflects in terms of the current year, the year in front of us within this report is 24-25, and also looks ahead to make sure we have an affordability profile so that we are making sensible decisions, obviously, over the 30-year period to make sure that we have a balanced HRA business plan. And lots of things can take place over a 30-year period. So there are a range of assumptions on rent, inflation, and on costs that obviously inform the business plan. So in terms of the business plan for 24-25, what you will see from the attached report is a really detailed review of both pressures, but also in terms of income and expenditure assumptions, and also looks at an updated 5-year capital programme and that 30-year affordability. As you will recall, we would normally present to committee that we set rent in line with the National Rent Standard, and that is a decision that obviously goes forward from this committee to the Strategy and Resources Committee and ultimately full council in February. So the report also looks at the levels of additional investment that we need. And we've talked earlier today about needing to increase investment in our repair service, but also in making sure that we have got the tenancy management services to support our tenants' rights, and also to deal with any statutory and regulation requirements to make sure both in the way we deliver services and how we improve our homes to make sure that they are safe. And also looks at both the national and local context, things that are happening, and there's lots of things happening in the housing sector presently, and also how we prepare for the new regulatory environment, both with the regulator for social housing and also building safety regulations, and how we are going to prioritise investment. The report looks at how we've been engaging with our tenants, and there's been some really helpful feedback today, but also throughout the year we receive quite a lot of information from our tenants in terms of the things that matter most to them. I think there's been previous conversations earlier on in this agenda about the timescales for the housing strategy and the approval process in the council for delivering that next year. And also, in terms of some of the wider plans, you will see from the business plan that a key priority for the business plan is to bring forward an asset management strategy for the council housing stock. And the start of that obviously will be a report in March committee. We have also previously agreed to carry out a 100% stock condition survey over the next 12 to 18 months, so we understand the condition of our homes. And there are also lots of other policy work that is taking place to make sure that we understand our customers, but we understand what our customers' priorities are and how we can improve not the quality of service, our performance, and also to make sure that we have got the investment programme absolutely right to increase the quality of our homes. So we've also, you will see from the report, there remains obviously a commitment to replace homes that are lost through right to buy. But also the council's doing a huge amounts of work in this space, not only what the council can do to increase affordable housing, which obviously, you know, the Sheffield City Council can't do that on their own. We need to be doing that obviously with lots of external partners given the level of shortage of affordable housing in the city. And there is huge amounts of work taking place with registered providers presently, you know, to see what will it take for them to work closely with the council to accelerate the numbers of affordable housing, so that profile will change as opportunities arise, you know, in terms of the capital programme, and any changes to that profile will be brought forward, both not only to this committee, but also as part of the council's overall capital programme. So, and attached to the report, hopefully you'll see that there's some useful information in terms of our stock, and its profile and the homes that we have available. And we also have got unprecedented demand for council housing presently. And that obviously is a key challenge for us. And that obviously requires us working really closely with registered providers in the city, but also the private rented sector, to make sure we've got enough homes for people to be able to be placed safely. And you will also see for many of you is how the stock profile is changing. You know, so many years ago, you know, we had more houses than flats, and you will see that the profile, a significant proportion of the council stock profile is flats. And obviously that's sometimes, you know, like difficult when, you know, we really need more homes and more houses, and particularly in some parts of the city. So hopefully that's a whistle-stop tour. The key priority for the business plan is to do some detailed work in 24-25, look at our priorities, bring forward our asset management strategy so we have a really good look at the condition of our stock. And, you know, and that may also look at some deep dives into certain archetypes which require a significant amount of investment in future, and also to make sure we do have an affordability profile for the 30th year of the HRA business plan that can be realised when taking into account our future income and expenditure and pressures on the business plan. So I really didn't want to go through all of the detailed report, but hopefully it provides quite a comprehensive look at the report, reflects, you know, on the council's wider strategic work, its city goals, our commitment to raise the quality quotient, and also commitment to what we would like to see in the future housing strategy, but also a range of information that hopefully will be held well, and this will go on its journey through to Strategy and Resources Committee as part of consideration of future budgets and savings, and also ultimately to set the rent at full council in the new year.
Right, thanks very much for that, the introduction of a really broad and overarching plan for the whole year for all our council tenants. So do we have any questions on that? I'm not seeing anyone apart from Nabila. So Nabila, over to you.
Sorry, Chair. I do have a number of questions again. Do you want me to go through it all together or take it?
As you think fit. If they group well together, then it would be helpful to get through a bit more speedily.
I'll do chunks if that's all right. It was just about the graph on page 82, right at the very top. I think there's predictions about like interest or borrowing rates. Sorry, Jan, would you mind explaining it a little bit more? Just because I was curious to see what modelling it was based on. And 2.15, I wasn't sure that I quite understood, I suppose, the sentiment of what the paragraph was trying to say. I think I might have misunderstood, and I'd just like just a brief, I suppose, explanation.
Yeah, Jan, if you can.
Yes, certainly. So what the report is saying is that over the last few years, we have benefited in terms of our investment strategy to have some capital reserves that we've been able to use. That's increased the amount of money that we've set aside for capital that comes from the annual rent. So a proportion of the rent that our tenants pay goes towards delivering all key services, including repair service, but also the capital programme. And what we have benefited from is some reserves that's been held to be able to increase the size of the capital programme. What that graph is showing is that one of the things that colleagues in the finance services have been doing is modelling. We have to model over the 30-year period. And what we've done is at what point we are going to need to significantly start increasing borrowing and to be able to afford the level of investment that is needed for our council housing stock. And what that graph is showing is that when we get over the next few years, what we will be doing is increasing significantly the borrowing. Now, for any borrowing, you have to pay back the borrowing costs and obviously the capital. So that means that will be a revenue. That will require a revenue contribution, which really we need to look at hand in glove with the asset management strategy. Because one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we are clear on the future capital investment need, also to look at how we make the best use of our day-to-day repairs budgets, but also to make sure that there is enough money in the overall 30-year business plan to be able to not only service any debt, but also to make sure we've got the right profile of capital investment for the council housing stock, or if we need to look at how we are improving homes and the range of homes that we have got within the portfolio. So what that graph is showing is that we've been able to rely on reserves alongside the rent, but after that period, we will be needing to service increasingly borrowing costs.
Thanks very much. Okay. More questions?
It was just about 2.5. So I just didn't quite understand what it says. Unless I did understand, I just didn't agree with it, which is another matter. Are we saying that we're looking to essentially sell off part of our housing stock in 2.15?
No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is we need to do a number of things. We will be setting out the steps in an asset management strategy that will come forward for this committee. We've also committed to carry out a 100% stock condition survey. So that will help inform the capital investment programme over the next 30 years for our council housing. What we are saying, and some of the comments that Tom's made today, is that some of our archetypes need a lot of money spending on them. And what we need to take all of the information that we have available from both our day-to-day repairs, and in terms of the the stock condition surveys. So we've already got, you know, lots of stock condition survey information, but actually sense check that against the 30-year investment plan. Look at what the new stock condition surveys are saying. Really have a good look at the archetypes that we have and some of the challenges that we may have. And also opportunity to look to see if there is any other investment elsewhere that can be brought in to reduce some of those capital costs. And then look at that to make sure that we are investing in homes that have a long-term viability, or we understand those archetypes that we need to make some decisions on and about how we invest in those stocks. But also over the 30 years, lots of things will happen. You know, you will see from some of the work that we're doing at Edward Street, some of the work that we are doing at Leadless Valley is taking a geographical approach. And also we might be bringing forward some wider regeneration programs in some of those areas where we know some archetypes are problematic. But it is a 30-year plan. Lots of things will happen in that 30-year plan. But I do think, and the recommendations in the report are saying, we don't wait for these things to become a problem. Once we've got the 100% stock condition survey, once we agree the priorities for the asset management strategy, we start doing that deep dive work on some of the stock options so that we've got plenty of time to make decisions.
Right, thanks very much, yes. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that, please?
On that particular point, it seems timely, so yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So Janet, basically we say we're looking at some of the properties we've got and we are working out whether they're worth modernising or whether we actually have to make the decision we never want to make, which is to knock them down and start again.
Yes, ultimately it'll be different. So what we know in some of the work that we've done and some of the work, you know, we're doing in terms of, you know, net zero, is that sometimes it's difficult to retrofit. But that doesn't automatically mean you're going with a bulldozer and knocking properties down. Sometimes it might be the way we actually... So if you look at our external wall insulation programme, some of our non-traditionals, we're having to all but go from the ground upwards to be able to improve them. And one of the things it may well be that some stock is not viable to be invested in, or it may well be that we have to take those properties right back down to the foundations and build them back. So it'll be a whole range of different things.
So the size of some of these properties and the new regulations that come up, so how big a bedroom can be, for example, or is it a cupboard, that sort of thing would have to be taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely, and one of the things that, you know, will be consulted on early in the new year is the new Decent Home Standard, and there will be future home standards over the life of the 30-year plan. One of the things that we do know from some of our council housing is that they are generous space standards in some not, but some they are. And also one of the things in terms of our allocations policy, we know we have, you know, large numbers of people in probably archetypes that obviously are hard. So we've also got to take account, you know, in terms of what the future needs of our tenants are. You know, we have a significant shortage of some types of homes, as well as, you know, some homes that are difficult, you know, to let. So this, once we've done the stock condition survey, we will then be looking at obviously the asset management strategy. We will look about some of the options and solutions, but it will also inform the council's wider growth strategy in terms of the gaps in affordable housing that we have in the city. And I think then we will be clearer to be able to speak with our RPs and other partners to be able to say, these are really the gaps we've got in the city and we need your help to help us bridge those gaps.
Right, thanks very much. That's been very accommodating. I don't think I've got any more questions, so if we go to the recommendation there, it's on page 78. So essentially we've got to note this report, the business plan priorities and the HRA revenue budget in the appendix to that. Possibly we can just update the years, because they're all for 24-25, the year forthcoming. Note, so let Rachel's little job for you, just to get the right dates in there. Note they're going to strategy and resources in January, and then on to full council. Note that the monitoring of the business plan lies with this committee. And note the recommendation for increasing rents in line with the rent standard. So those things we asked to note today. Everyone happy with that? Yep, I'll take that as a unanimous noting there. So I'll just say thanks to all the officers for the huge amount of work that goes into drawing this up for this annual plan. And thanks to the members who've been involved with that too. That, I think, is the end of the meeting. Yeah, I think it is time to say have a good Christmas, everyone, and we will see you in the new year. Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers.